I can understand how by prayaschitta you may counteract the effect of sinful activities. I mean that's understood. He said, but still, the desire or the seed, the seed of material enjoyment is still there in the heart. So the prayaschitta doesn't destroy that. And so then Sukadeva Goswami, basically he responds, actually I was just testing you out to see if you were listening or not. And so Sukadeva Goswami, he then goes on to describe that, the reason we get caught up in these activities is because we have fruitive desires. We want to enjoy the material world. We want to have, name, fame, glory, prestige, bank balance, nice car, nice house, nice wife, nice family, all this kind of stuff. These are fruitive desires, and the desire or the endeavor to counteract that with prayaschitta is also another fruitive desire, because you don't want to give up the desire, you just want to counteract the negative effects so you can keep enjoying, you can keep desiring these things, so you can keep enjoying the material world. So that in itself is also a fruitive desire. So it's actually something that's, I was reading a purport this morning in this second canto, chapter 7, where Prabhupada was pointing out that actually to desire to increase your comfortable situation in this material world is actually a desire in the mode of ignorance. And we see the whole world is aspiring in that way. They want to increase their comfortable situation. And all these inventions they come up with, whatever it may be, so, like now they have electric cars, that's the big thing, and it's just they want to increase their enjoyment, because they're saying, oh well, if we have petrol, if we have all these vehicles that run on hydrocarbons and stuff like that, it's polluting the world, so it's going to be more difficult for us to live here because of the pollution and because of the global warming and stuff. So let's have electric cars. So whatever it is, it's all just about their enjoyment, about their sense enjoyment. But then what happens is Sukadeva Goswami tells Parikshit Maharaj this story about a jar mill. Anyone familiar with this story?
Yeah.
It's quite an interesting story. A jar mill was a Brahmana, a young Brahmana. He lived in a place called Kanyakubja, which is near Lucknow. What do they call it now? Kannauj is the name of it these days. That's where they make the kush oil. And so he followed all his practices of devotion, not devotion, so his Brahminical practices and stuff like that. But at one point he saw, his guru had sent him out to collect some kusha grass and some other shippy, or I can't remember the name of the other grass. 2 types of grass he asked him to collect for doing puja, for doing yajna. And so he, on the way back, he happened to notice a Sudra and a Sudrani. Is that the smoke alarm going off?
No.
He happened to notice a Sudra and a Sudrani embracing in a doorway. And the Sudra, he had decorated himself up, he had turmeric on his arms, he was looking very attractive. And the Sudrani was intoxicated. And so they were really kind of, they were oblivious to the rest of the world, and actually her clothes were loosened and they were starting to slip off her body and stuff like that. And he saw this, and he became agitated. But he was trying to the best of his capacity, with all his Brahminical ability and the things he'd learnt, the mantras and things he'd learnt, to overcome this. But he couldn't. And there's a really important reason why he couldn't. Because his activities, his so-called practice, were actually focusing on fruitive activities. They weren't actually focusing on, karma and jnana was where his practice was at. It wasn't focusing on the process of bhakti. And we see, most of you have probably come from India, or at least spent time in India and stuff like that. And you'll see in India, there seems in some ways to be much more religiosity than you'll see here in the West. But actually, the religiosity they practice in India is largely karmakanda. Because, I'm sure you all remember that song, Om Jai Jagadish Hari. I'm sure you've heard that one, right? Give me a house by the sea, give me this, give me that, and I'll give you 1 rupee, Om Jai Jagadish Hari. So the idea is like they perform their religious activities for fruitive gain. So ultimately, it's not a really high grade of religious activities. It's actually quite low grade, because really the real intention is to get some enjoyment. It's not about developing a relationship with God. And because they have this desire for fruitive enjoyment, it means these activities will bind them in this material world. There's a nice verse in the end of the 3rd chapter of the Gita where Krishna says, Yagdata Kaunol Yakra Loko Yang Kama Bandhana. That, if you don't perform activities for the satisfaction of Yagya is another name of Vishnu or Krishna, then the Kama Bandhana, your activities will cause you to be bound up in this material world. So if you're doing the activities for yourself, that causes bondage. Because then you derive some satisfaction from that, you derive some enjoyment from that, and it's like they have a scientific explanation. It's like when you do things that you enjoy doing, you get a what they call a buzz, right? Well, what happens, like chemically in your body, is your body releases this substance called dopamine into your endocrine system, I think it is, and then this gives you a feeling of satisfaction. It's just like, I like a year ago I started going to the gym because my body was kind of getting weaker and stuff. So I have to do something about this, otherwise old age is going to be very difficult. And so I started going to the gym, and one thing I noticed is when you do a good workout, like a workout where you're really sort of working hard, you feel good even though you feel exhausted. So I think this must be this, the body's injecting this dopamine into the system. Make sure it gives you this satisfaction. So you'll find that whenever you do something, you get some satisfaction from it. It's just like a chemical reaction happening in the body. But because they're doing, they might be doing their so-called religious activities for some fruitive gain, then they get satisfaction from this when they get the gain. Oh look, I got a new car, or I got this, I got that, whatever it is. And of course there's many injunctions in the Vedas that are given for people to engage in serving different types of devatas and other personalities to get some result. And this is all part of the Vedic system. But there's also a plan behind this, because to do some sacrifice or to do some austerity to get some benefit following the Vedic text is better than just engaging in wanton sense gratification. Because at least you're following the Vedic texts. Because in the Vedas, there's 3 main divisions. There's the karma kanda. This is people who just act for fruitive activities. But they're doing it according to the Vedic texts. So if they follow because Narad Muni talks about this, I think it's in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, about pravritti marg and nivritti marg. So the pravritti marg, this is what's described in the Vedas, how you perform these activities following the Veda to get some fruitive result, because the idea is by following this process, eventually you'll see the futility of it. But if you're just doing these activities just purely for the point of sense gratification, as you see, like in this material world, in a big place like Glasgow, you'll see there's some people drinking alcohol, people taking drugs, etc., like that. They never see the futility in it. They just think they're having a great time. But actually, as devotees, we can see this, and we can see this is a futile activity, because where does it lead them? Ultimately, it brings about death, and their body decays very rapidly, things like that. So it's not a very positive way of going forward. So they have karma kanda, they have jnana kanda. So jnana kanda is about essentially philosophical speculation, trying to understand the truth through just sometimes there's this idea of neti, the truth is not this, it's not that, it's not that, oh, it must be this, So that's also a part of the Vedic path, and there is regulations on how they should do this. And then the last section is called upasana kanda. So upasana, there's 2 words. Upa means to come there, asana means sit down. So it's about worshipping. It's about, usually it starts off with worship of the devatas and the upadevatas and lesser beings. But the whole idea is like, if you follow the process accurately or according to what's given in the scriptures, ultimately it should bring you to the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the point the Gyanakan, the Karmakan, Gyanakan, the Pasanakan, is to elevate your consciousness to come to the point of worshipping God. But then, and you'll see that people, when they start to worship God, often when they go through the system at least, it is usually that their initial approach is an approach of Karmakanda, where they approach God, but they want something. That they want, they want to have a nice wife, they want to have nice children, they want to have their children successful at university, all this sort of stuff. But that's ultimately it's a fruitive activity. But and there's a nice verse in the what's that? Savai pung samparao damo yota baka hoituki apatiya yayatma suprati. Is explaining that the supreme dharma, savai pumsam means mankind, parol dharmo, it means dharma. The para means the highest, and dharma means obviously religious activities, or actually, to define it more accurately, dharma means the constitutional nature of a living entity. It's just like, Prabhupada gives the example of water. What is the dharma of water?
Liquid.
Huh?
Liquid.
It's liquid. But if it's frozen and it's solid, is it still water? No,
Ice.
It's ice. You have to inject some heat into it to return it to its original constitutional position. So, everything has its constitutional nature. So the as the Bhagavatam says, the savai pungsam parodamo yato bhakti adhoxija. This point of bhakti to adhoxija. Adhoxija means the Supreme Lord. Yeah? This is the supreme dharma for humanity, for humankind, where you're engaged in serving Krishna. And then it goes that yato bhakti ahoitaki apatihatya yayatma suprasidati. This verse is this line ahoitaki apati. So it must be unmotivated, mean no motivation at all. I'm not after, I'm not serving Krishna because I want this, I want that. I want to become famous, I want to have a big job, I want to have lots of money, I want to travel in style, business class or first class or whatever. That shouldn't be our approach. Some people do that, and often they get these things. But the problem comes is they get distracted by that, and they forget what the process is, what the goal is. So it says, ahoitaki apratihatya yayatma suprasidati. So this sidati means like satisfaction. Yayatma means of the self. Yeah? So supra. Pra means like, Prabhupada would often use this term prakrishta rupena when you put this term in there, which means it's like really amplifying. And then suprasidati is really amplifying it. So basically what it's saying is you will become completely satisfied if you perform this bhakti, which is unmotivated and uninterrupted. Now through practicing like karma kanda and these other things, through approaching the Lord for material activities, to fulfill material desires, it's very difficult to come to this point of this unmotivated, uninterrupted devotionals, and very difficult to come to this point of satisfaction. Because when you have one material desire gets fulfilled, what happens? You have another material desire. Well, what about this one? What about this one? What about that one? What about this one? There's no end to it, and that's the nature. And Krishna explains that to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, where in the I think it's the third chapter, where he's Aptakena Parukaya. What's the verse? He talks about Kama Esha, Koroda Esha, Raja Guna Samudbha, Mahashanama, this Kama Esha, it's like this lust. It's like the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. And it is dushpralena analena Acharya says, it's never satisfied and it burns like fire. So when you have these material desires, then they're just never satisfied. And the more you try to satisfy them, the bigger they grow. It's just like, Krishna's using this example, never satisfied, burn like fire. So, if you've ever seen a fire, if you throw fuel on the fire, what happens? Does the fire go out? It gets bigger. And it gets bigger. And the more fuel you throw on, the bigger the fire gets. And like in so many parts of the world now, they're experiencing like really serious bushfires. Spain, Canada, all over the place. There are these massive fires going on, and there's so much fuel to burn, so the fires just get bigger and bigger and bigger. We have quite a lot of experience of this in Australia, especially in the southern parts of Australia. Every summer, especially February, you get these lots of massive bushfires. And when there's a lot of fuel on the ground, because usually in Australia, the way the trees grow, you have eucalypts, and they shed their leaves and they shed their bark continuously, and that's how they fall on the ground and they compost down. That's how they feed themselves is through this composting. But when it's a particularly dry summer, that all dries out, and then it's very flammable, and so you have these huge big fires. And also, the eucalyptus tree have eucalyptus oil in, which also is quite flammable. And you can see sometimes when they have these fires, the trees explode from the heat. And so, the lust is like that. When you have desires, when you try to satisfy these material desires, then you'll never satisfy them. And this is what was happening with Ajamil. He was trying, he became attracted to this prostitute, and then it was a short while afterwards that this prostitute started to work for him in his house. And then he fell in love with the prostitute, he fell down with the prostitute, he gave up his Brahmin wife, and then he lived a life of sin. And so, because he practiced some level of devotional activity previously, by Krishna's arrangement, he was able to name his son Narayan. And so what was happening is, and it was his youngest son, so he was very attracted to him. It's like, there's a word in Sanskrit, sneha. Sneha means affection, but it also means oil. And oil flows down. So sneha means that the affection flows down to the youngest. And you'll usually find that in a family, as the youngest one is the darling of the family most often, because it's just the nature of affection. And so he was very attached to his son Narayan, so he's saying, Narayan, please come here, Narayan, bring me this, Narayan, do this, Narayan, do that. So he was always chanting the name of Narayan. But for him it was just his son. And then what happened is, at the moment when he got old and his body was becoming decrepit, that he was dying, he was just about to die. And the Yamadutas came to rip him out of his body. And he saw the Yamadutas and he called out for Narayan out of fear. And so immediately the Vishnu Dutas appeared on the scene and forbade them. He said, stop, you can't take him. And they explained why. Because the Yamadutas are saying, who are you? Who do you think, your authority? You have any authority here? And so they explained, or they actually said to the Yamadutas, before you can take this man, you have to explain to us religious principles and why it is you feel that you're qualified to take this person. So they started to explain all about religious principles, and they started talking about how everyone in this world is caught up in fruitive activity. And these fruitive activities are ultimately sinful, because why? They're trying to enjoy themselves separately from God. Anything separate from God but is sinful activity. But we shouldn't think that, I'll just connect it with God. I'll still do my fruitive activity, but I'll just use Krishna's name, to purify it or to make it sanctified. Just like I was sent a picture recently of some devotees somewhere in the world had dressed the temple deity with the clothes they were going to wear themselves, because they wanted to get the Mahaprasad from that. So this is just using the deity for your own sense gratification. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he gave it a very interesting phrase. He said it's like taking the Shalagram Shila and using it to crack nuts. Very, very offensive. If you're using the deity to satisfy yourself, very, very offensive. So then, so we need to be careful of that we don't try to just use the Lord to satisfy our personal needs. There's no problem with benefiting from the service when you get, there's so much fruit comes from the service, but you really have to look at the intention. What's the intention there? Is the intention to serve Krishna, or is the intention to get the fruit? If the intention is to get the fruit, then that's not so good. The intention should be to serve Krishna, and then the fruits can come. And so then they were asking the Yamadutas to explain, why they felt they were qualified. And then what the Vishnu Dutas said is that actually, we accept what you're saying, but this doesn't apply to Ajamil, because he is actually free from sinful reaction, because at the moment of death he chanted the name of Narayan without offence. He may not have chanted it purely, but he chanted it without offence. So it has a very powerful, purifying effect. And this is the nature of the holy name of the Lord. It says there's many nice verses in the Bhagavatam. So many places. There's what's that? Apana Sanskrit Goram. How's it go?
No.
Yeah. So it's talking about how the holy name of the Lord. It's so pure that even fear personified fears the holy name. In other places it mentions how Tasmat Sankatana Vishnu Jagan Mangalangam Mahasam Mahatama Vikairavya Vidya Kantika Niskritam. That this is Jagan Mangalam Mahasam. It's the most auspicious activity in the Jagat, the universe. There's nothing more auspicious than chanting the holy name of the Lord. And it's able to uproot the reactions to even the greatest of sins. There's no offensive or no sinful activity or sinful reaction that chanting the holy name can't overcome. But then, there's if you go through in the Padma Purana, it describes the Dasanam Aparad, and there it mentions that the greatest offence is the seventh offence is to commit sinful activities in the strength of the holy name. So what that means, if you think, okay, if I chant the name Krishna once, it can destroy one lifetime's sinful activities. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead with my business and I'll chant Hare Krishna and I'll destroy all these sinful activities. Some people think like that, but actually it's said that this is the greatest sinful activity because you can never recover from that if you have that mentality. So the idea is to understand that yes, I have performed many sinful activities in my life, but by giving this life to the service of Krishna, then I can overcome the effect of that. But you have to surrender, otherwise the sinful activities just continue. They just keep going on. And so we see in this pastime, and there's many pastimes. Also, you'll see that the pastime of Gajendra, this pastime of Gajendra Moksha. So he also was in a very precarious situation, and he remembered a mantra, glorifying the Lord, and so he chanted that mantra, and he was saved. The Lord Vishnu appeared and chopped off the head of the crocodile with his chakra, and so Gajendra was saved. And there's so many different pastimes that are there in Krishna Leela, in Chaitanya Leela, where people have taken shelter of the holy name and they've been saved. Even we see with Jagai and Madhai, there's an interesting description in the Chaitanya Bhagavat that talks about Jagai and Madhai, how they performed uncountable sinful activities. I mean, anything you can think of, they were doing it en masse. Just anything, and even things you can't think of because they're just too sinful to think about. And it's described how it's like Chandragupta, he's the secretary of Yamaraj, and he's the one who keeps track of everyone's sinful activities. He's very capable. He had many scribes, and they couldn't keep up documenting the sinful activities of Jagai and Madhai. So sinful. And what happened was that when Lord Chaitanya bestowed his mercy upon them, and that they realized that we've just performed so many unlimited sinful activities, and it actually described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat how when Lord Chaitanya embraced Madhai, he went black from absorbing the sinful activities. Yeah? But it's described there how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just said, you serve the Vaishnava, the only way you can overcome this is you serve the Vaishnavas incessantly and you chant the holy name without stop. Because that's the only way that can save you. And if we honestly look at our lives, what we've done in this material world, and obviously you can't think of what we've done in past lives, but we've been so many lifetimes we've just acted in a way that's separate from Krishna. And the only remedy for us is to chant the holy names of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Maybe a week and a half ago, I was giving class in London, and I made the point there, which I think is quite important. It's like we need to take up the practice of devotional service like our life depends on it. You know? Like Prabhupada, sometimes he would use this phrase, you chant the holy name of the Lord like a baby crying out for its mother. And you'll see like the baby is completely helpless. It has it can't walk, it can't talk, it can't do things, it can't feed itself, can't change its underwear, whatever. It can't do anything. Its life is completely dependent upon the mother. And if the mother is good, then she cares for the baby nicely. But we see in this day and age, there's many mothers who don't just don't have the right mentality for it. And so the point I was making is we need to take to the process of bhakti as if our life depends on it, because it does. We really need to understand that is how our life is completely dependent upon our practice of bhakti. And it's the same with the chanting of the holy name. Because as it's described, Lord Chaitanya, he quotes that verse several times. It's Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, Kalo nasteva, nasteva, nasteva gatiranyata. In this age of Kali, he says, there's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way to achieve emancipation. Chant the holy names, chant the holy names, chant the holy names. This is the only means of achieving spiritual emancipation. And he says clearly, nasteva, nasteva, nasteva gatiranyata. So gati means the destination. So it's the only way to achieve the destination. So if we understand that, this simple verse by Lord Chaitanya, that the only way to achieve the destination we're all hankering for is to chant the holy names, then what should be our attitude to chanting the holy names? What do you think?
Surrender.
Huh?
Surrender.
Surrender is one thing, but what should be your attitude towards chanting the holy name? My life depends upon this. My existence depends upon this. My sanity depends upon this. Because this is a crazy world. I mean, just the stuff. I mean, I don't know if you guys read the news or listen to the news or whatever, but there's a lot of crap. I saw a headline just because I live in Australia, so I want to know what's going on in Australia. There's a headline there. This guy in Queensland, which is one of the northern states of Australia, just got arrested for 1,623 counts of child abuse, sexual child abuse, over a period of 11 years. 1,600 counts. And I think there's about 160 cases of raping. That's just like, the mind boggles. That's how mad this world's becoming. So, if we don't take shelter of Krishna fully, if we don't take shelter of Krishna, we have to come back and experience it. And this is only the beginning of Kali Yuga. It's only been going for 5,000 years. Do you want to wait around for when Kalki descends? How mad is it going to be then? And I'm sure all of you have had this experience just in the period of your short life. How degraded things are becoming in this world. So, therefore, we can see how imperative the process of bhakti is for us. You have, this persons who have some intelligence can see the nature of this age. They can see how difficult this age is and how difficult it is going to become. It's only just started. 5,000 years out of 432,000 years. What's that percentage-wise? It's like about 1%. It's only gone 1% through the age, and already it is really crazy. Already it's really disturbing. So, as it goes on, it's not going to get better. In Australia, they have this expression, it doesn't get any better than this. And I say, yeah, it doesn't. It's all downhill. That's the nature of Kali Yuga. But, Lord Chaitanya mentions, it's also in the Bhagavatam, it says, Kale dosha nide rajan asti hekamanda, kirtanara Krishna cha mukta samapara. It's the Kale dosha. So dosha means fault. So Kali, nide means like an ocean. So this age of Kali, it's an ocean of faults, he says, my dear king. But he says, Asti hi eko mahadgunam. But in this Asti hi, he says, indeed, hi eko. Indeed, there's one great quality. Kirtanadeva Krishna Shah. Yeah? By chanting the names of Krishna, Mukta Sanga Param Brajet. You become liberated from this contaminated association, Param Brajet, and you achieve the highest destination. Braja means you go. Yeah? And Param means you go to the highest place. Yeah? So simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, you can overcome the influence of this age. You can purify your senses, you can purify your desires, and you can achieve the supreme destination. And as Lord Chaitanya says, it is the only way. And that's why we really need to take this process seriously. Okay, if you're happy here in Glasgow and you don't mind a little bit of this, a little bit of that, what they call a little bit of argy-bargy going on, then fine. Don't take it so seriously. But if you've had it up to here kind of thing with the stuff that goes in the material world, if you really see how you're suffering and see how others are suffering, and suffering doesn't necessarily mean you kind of you're on the side of the road and you're being run over by a car or something like that. Suffering just means, it can mean simple things like it's too hot or it's too cold. You need a fan because it's suffering. You need a heater because it's cold. Every aspect of material life means suffering. There's always some inconvenience, and when you're inconvenienced, that's suffering. When you don't have the right things to eat, you suffer. You get indigestion. It's all suffering. So are you okay with that? Do you like suffering? I don't think anyone does. But intelligent persons, you don't really need to have much intelligence, but just you have a little bit of intelligence, you can see that this material world is a place of suffering. And Lord Chaitanya has given you a solution. This is, you chant the holy name, you chant the holy name, you chant the holy name. This is the only way of achieving emancipation. There's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way. So with this knowledge, and using our intelligence, we need to see the desperate urgency of this, how we need to dive in deeply to a holy name. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in the Harinam Chintamani, he's given a bit of a commentary on the 10 offences there, and he points out that the kind of one of the more prominent offences is inattention. Because we sit down and we chant our rounds, and we might be sort of have our phone out or our iPad or computer out and doing something else, or we're reading the headlines or whatever. But it's just like any relationship you're having. Like you might have a friend and you're having a relationship with them, but then you're doing something else while you're having a conversation with them, or you're not really interested in what they have to say. I mean, how do you feel? When someone's distracted, when you're trying, especially when you're trying to have some like a deep and meaningful conversation. It's like you're telling them all about the challenges you're having in life, or I just had an argument with my wife or my boss or something like this. I'm feeling very devastated by that, and you're trying to get some kind of guidance or some comfort in life, and then that's interesting. Oh yeah, that's really good, and you tell them about all these things that are going wrong for you. Oh yeah, that's really good. How do you feel? You feel like you're not very important to them. You feel like that your concerns are not really, they don't really matter that much. Right? So it's the same thing when we're chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, because the whole idea of chanting is we're trying to purify our hearts and reawaken our lost relationship with Krishna. Right? But a relationship means, there needs to be some kind of response, some sort of reciprocal exchange there. And if we're distracted, then it's not going to work so well. It'll have its effect, but it'll be somewhat of a distracted effect. And as Krishna says in the Gita, he says, Yayata mam prapajante tam satai vajamyaham. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So if you want to surrender to Krishna in a distracted way, you'll get a distracted response. It's reciprocal. So, if we understand what's going on here, we understand what the destination is, we understand what we're hoping to achieve, what we want to achieve, this destination of being in an eternal loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How important is that to you? A little bit important? Not so important? or is it very important?
Very important.
So if it's very important, you need to apply yourself with the same intensity. But generally what happens is we look, at least I look at myself and I see, like, I'm applying myself in a way that indicates to me that it's a little bit important. But it's not like chanting the holy name is like my breath, and without breathing I die. But that's what it needs to become. It needs to get to this point where, without the holy name, without this connection with Krishna, you feel like you're going to die. And that's the stage of Ruchi, I think, from memory. Maybe you know better, I think that's the stage of Ruchi. We get to this point where, without this connection with Krishna, we think we're going to die. So we need to develop that attachment for chanting. We need to develop that attachment for the process of bhakti. And then also, because I think it's part of what we're going to talk about, is we need to also have that kind of enthusiasm to give it the process of Krishna consciousness to others, because we see, we experience every day we're suffering. We're fortunate enough that we can see that. Most people in this world, they can't see that. They think they're having a great time. Like, you see the guy on the street who's drunk, falls down, flat on his face, and he's just oblivious to anything in the world. He thinks this is life. They're having a great time here. I remember years ago I was in a pub in a place called Newtown in Sydney, and I was with one of the Hare Krishna bands, and I was doing the sound for the band. This is going back like 40 years, I think. And this guy, he was just oblivious drunk, blotto, as they call it. And he fell over and he fell onto his glass went like that into his eye, it broke, and he was just so drunk he was oblivious to the whole thing. And you wake up the next day probably in a lot of pain and stuff, but it's just like the whole world is like that. They're just like oblivious with intoxication, oblivious in sex life, oblivious with all these different types of things. They don't realise how much they're suffering. So the compassionate nature of a Vaishnava Vaishnava is known as being para dukkha dukhi. That when he sees others suffering, he becomes very sad. He or she, and they want to help. They want to help others. They want to help others to understand, firstly, who you are. You're not this body. You're Krishna. You're a spirit soul. You're Krishna's eternal servant, and your business is to serve Krishna. So that's the process of bhakti. It's about myself becoming Krishna conscious, but not keeping that for me. Devotees aren't selfish. Devotees want to share what they have. There's an interesting story. I think it might have been a story about Ramanujacharya. I'm not sure. But this saintly devotee had received a mantra from his guru, and the guru said that this mantra is the most beneficial mantra in the world. But it's a secret mantra. You can't say it to anyone. But it's so powerful that simply by chanting this mantra, then you'll awaken your love of Godhead. And so he gave him the mantra, and immediately he climbed up on top of the tallest building in town, and he called out, "Everyone come here. I have this mantra. This mantra is so powerful. If you just chant this mantra, all your material desires will be vanquished, and your love of God will awaken." And the whole town assembled, and he yelled out and he told them all the mantra. And when he came down, the guru was furious with him. He said, "How could you tell me this mantra?" He said, "Gurudev, you told me this mantra. By chanting this mantra, then all the material desires are vanquished, and love of God will be awakened. So I want everyone to there's a compassionate nature of Vaishnavas. Everyone should be chanting this mantra because everyone's suffering." And the Guru realized actually his realization is greater than mine. And so that's the compassionate nature of the Vaishnava, is that they want to give Krishna consciousness to everyone. And Lord Chaitanya, he said that. Yare dekhe tahakara Krishna vadesha mara gaiva guru haratani desh. Whomever you meet in this land, you instruct them in the sights of Krishna, as is given in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. In this way, on my order, become a guru and deliver people from this land. It doesn't mean you become a Diksha guru, necessarily. But it means you're guiding people. That, in a sense, is a guru. So you guide people. It could be anyone. It could be a postman when he's delivering a parcel. You just somehow or other give him Krishna. doesn't necessarily mean you have to bang him over the head with the Bhagavad Gita. Because somehow or other you give them Krishna. And even it can extend to things like the way we interact with people. An interesting story I heard at Bhaktivedanta Manor, maybe 15 years ago. It was Prabhupada's disappearance day. And one of the ladies had just been to the hospital to deliver a baby. She had a baby. And she was picked up in the ambulance. And the ambulance attendant explained to her, he said, "Oh, you're one of these Hare Krishnas from the Watford temple, are you?" And she, yeah. And he said, "Interesting, I met your spiritual master." And she was, she's like a second generation devotee, so she's wondering, how does he know my spiritual master? And so she asked him to explain. And so he explained that in 1977, he was an ambulance attendant doing the same thing. And Prabhupada had a urinary tract. Prabhupada was at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and he had a urinary tract infection. So the ambulance came and took him to the hospital in Watford. And this guy was the ambulance attendant. And Prabhupada was just so nice to him. I mean, Prabhupada wasn't doing anything different. He was just nice with people, But the way he interacted with that person made an impression upon him. So that, this was in like 2006 or 8 or something like that. So I mean 77 to 23, 31 years later, 31 years later, this man still remembers that exchange he had with Prabhupada. How powerful is that? He had such a positive exchange with Prabhupada, he had a positive impression. And the thing he said is, "Yes, I met your spiritual master, he was such a nice man." How beneficial is that to the guy? It's like, it means in his next life, because the way it works, Krishna explains in the Gita, it says, what's that verse? "In this endeavour there is no loss or diminution. And a little advance from this path can protect one from most dangerous type of fear." So it means, like, Prabhupada explains that. It's like a bank account, You put £10 in a bank account, right? You leave it there for some time, and there's interest. So then you have £11. So Prabhupada explains the devotional process is like that. You make some endeavour in spiritual life, and you get up to 10%. And then you start in your next life, you'll start off at 11%. There's interest. So it means that this ambulance attendant, in his next life, he is going to get the opportunity to meet another pure devotee. And he'll be able to, he'll be able to take his spiritual life a little bit further. And Prabhupada sometimes he would talk about it being like a business. It's like every day you put aside, $1, $1. He says when you have $100, you can start a business. Devotional service is like that. You build up enough pious credit, the Gyatha Sukriti, that it gets to the point where you actually take the process of bhakti. So this is why it's really important also that we share this process as much as we can with others. And we try to give them Krishna consciousness. And a very important part of that also is our acha. There's a saying, it's first in India, first acha, then was it acha, vicha, then pracha. So behavior has to be there first. Then understanding, vicha, realization, then pracha, preaching. If you don't have good behavior, then what are they going to follow? What are they going to do? They're going to look at the way you behave yourself. I remember I had a Christian upbringing, and oftentimes people would be sort of telling you about how you've got to be a Christian, this thing, that thing. But you look at their behaviour, and it was like there was some actually substantial disparity between what they were preaching and what they were doing. But in order to be an effective preacher in Krishna consciousness, apani achari prabhuji vera sikhvaya. First your behaviour becomes ideal, then you can preach. Prabhupada would quote this hundreds of times actually, he would say that a lot. First your behaviour becomes ideal, then you can preach. And we see that Sanatana Goswami, he said this about Thakur Haridas. He said, my dear Lord, my dear sir, some people they behave nicely, but they don't preach. And some people preach, but they don't behave nicely. He said, but you, my dear sir, you both behave nicely and you preach. Therefore, you're qualified to be the spiritual master of the whole world. The very important thing is like our behaviour has to be aligned with what we're saying. Not that we're saying, give up your sinful activities and all this kind of stuff, and we're doing the same stuff we're telling people to give up. It's very hollow. It's empty words. My mother used to, my God bless her soul, lovely person, but she did have some challenges in life. She would always tell us not to take drugs. Bad for you. But every night she was intoxicated, she'd drink alcohol. There's an interesting story from one lady. She had this son who was always eating sweets, and she was concerned that the sugar was bad for him. So she decided she was going to go to Mahatma Gandhi and ask Mahatma Gandhi to tell him not to eat sweets because he'll listen to him. And so she goes to Mahatma Gandhi and she said, Gandhiji, please tell him don't eat sweets, they're bad for him. He said, okay, come back in 3 days' time and I'll tell him. So she came back in 3 days' time. The son, he said, my dear boy, don't eat sweets, they're bad for you. And she's a bit perplexed. She said, well, why didn't you tell him that 3 days ago? Why did you wait 3 days? He says, because 3 days ago I was also eating sweets. So if we have integrity, we're going to practice what we preach. And people know, the people can sense that. If you're saying something that you're not following, then they understand. They're not stupid. So it's very important. It's like, yes, we have to understand, that this process of bhakti is the only thing that will save us in this material world. Nothing else has the power to save you. No fruitive activity will save you. No, you can go to your temples and do all these different yagas and pujas and stuff like that. And if it's not serving Krishna, it's of no benefit whatsoever. You may get some material fruit from it, but ultimately it's of no benefit, and it'll just cause you to be bound up in this world for more. Like you go to Mumbai, there's that what is it, the brain dead. What's his name? Ganapati temple. That famous Ganapati temple there in Mumbai. Huh?
Siddhivinayak.
Yes, Ganapati temple. Yeah. And it's every Wednesday, I think. There's this huge queue, tens of thousands of people coming there for benedictions. All the big movie stars, all the politicians, they're all lining up there for benedictions. And sometimes they get their benedictions, sometimes they don't. But what does that do for them? How does that help them in their forward journey in life? It actually causes them to be bound up because it just increases their material desires. That's all it does. Oh, I can get this when I go to Ganapati. Oh, maybe I'll get, like last week I got a new Tata Sumo. Maybe this week I'll go and get something bigger and better. I'll ask for a Volvo or something, It just increases the desires because I say, I can get things like this, It's just like sometimes you see there was, when I was a kid, there was we learned something at school about Pavlov. Have you ever heard that guy Pavlov? The famous Pavlov's dog? No? He was a scientist and he was exploring. You must have heard about that, Doctor? Pavlov's dog? There was a thing about conditioned reflex. So what they did is they trained the dog in such a way as they blow a whistle and then feed the dog. And so what they found out after a while is if they blew the whistle, the dog would start salivating straight away. Another thing he did was he had a mouse inside a box, and there was a dividing thing in the box, and he had two electric plates either side. And he put voltage on the plate, one side, and he jumped the other side. Then he put voltage there to get hot, and he jumped the other side and put voltage there. So the mouse, after a while, he turned the things off, and the mouse kept jumping because he thought it was hot. So people become conditioned to this kind of behaviour. Like they even did that with monkeys, that if they press this button, they get a banana. If they press the right button, they get a banana. So, and people are like that. They're like monkeys. They just press the right button, they'll get a banana. So let's not be like that. Let's understand what our position is, who we are, and do our best, to our best capacity, surrender to Krishna. Give up our material desires and surrender to Krishna. This process is so important. It's so important. And without diligently applying ourselves to this process, we're going to struggle in the material world. Any comments or questions at all?
Just one question. So, I think we all are kind of grihastha. So we have responsibilities as well as like taking our family, the job, and everything. So how can we kind of try to balance both, like spiritual life, taking Krishna's name, holy name, and also taking care of our family and the jobs and everything?
Yeah, I mean, definitely sometimes it can be a bit of a juggling act, but you need to make time for both. You need to make time for your spiritual life. You need to make time for your family. So usually, what I've seen some devotees do. I mean, I'm fortunate because my children have grown up now, so I don't have that sort of same problem. But like usually, what I see some greenhouses do is they'll get up early in the morning before the kids, so they can do their sadhana, they can chant, they can have kirtan, stuff like that. But also, I mean, it's like there's a really beautiful verse in the ninth chapter of the Gita where Krishna says, Yad karoshi yadashnasi yadjahos yadtabashashkunte yadtatkurusha vadapara. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away, whatever austerities you perform, you do that as some kunti is an offering to me. So Krishna's, it just means whatever you do in life. You raise your children. What are you doing it for? Just so they can become doctors or lawyers, and you'll find that most people from India, they really push their kids hard to get an education and become a qualified professional. But that's got nothing to do with Krishna consciousness. The main thing is to focus on somehow or other, by your example, and Prabhupada explains this in the 6th chapter of the Gita, in that what's that Suchiman Srimatam Gehe Yoga Bhasta Brajayate verse, where he's saying like, it's like whatever you do by your actions, by your what you the example you're setting for your children, inspire them to become devotees. That's successful parenting. But if they become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, so what? There's millions of doctors and lawyers out there. What's that? Is that a big achievement in life? How many devotees are there? If your children become a pure devotees of Krishna, that's successful parenting. So it means like Krishna's saying, whatever you do, whatever you offer, or eat, whatever you do, you do that as an offering to me. So when you raise your children, you do that as an offering to Krishna. When you cook your meal, you do that as an offering to Krishna. When you clean the house, you do that as an offering for Krishna. When you go to work, you drive to work, you do that as an offering for Krishna. At your job, you do that as an offering for Krishna. So in that way, your whole life becomes an offering to Krishna. Then Krishna explains in the next verse, he says, Suba Suba Eva Moksha Kampada Sanyaso Vimukto Mamapashati. He said, in this way, you'll become free to the bondage to auspicious and inauspicious works, and with your mind fixed on me as principle of renunciation, you'll be liberated and that shall come to me. Okay? So just by everything you're doing, you just do it for Krishna. Whatever it is you do in life, you just do it for Krishna's pleasure. I remember when I first joined the temple, it's like, like these days, it's like, can you clean the floor? But when I joined, it was always, can you clean Krishna's floor? Can you wash Krishna's pots? Can you cook Krishna's lunch? Devotees were trying their best to focus everything around Krishna. And Krishna explains in the Gita that if we can, is Bhakti Rangavitavasam Savalok Maheshwaram Suridam Salabhutam Gyatramam Shanti Mashati. The one who understands that I am the only friend, the benefactor of all sacrifice and austerities, Bhakti Rangavitavasam Savalok, the proprietor of all the planets and demigods and thereon. And he said, Gyatramam, knowing me like this, Shanti Mrichati, they attain peace. So everything belongs to Krishna anyhow. Even your body belongs to Krishna. You belong to Krishna. But if we acknowledge that through our activities, by doing everything for his pleasure, then that's Krishna consciousness. It's not like, it becomes a struggle when we try to do them as separate things. Like kids are okay. Like, if they become separate things, like raising my family, my Krishna consciousness, if they're separate things, that's a struggle. Mm-hmm. But if you understand it's the same thing, raising a family is devotional service. If you do it for the pleasure of Krishna, if your intention is to, you can't force them. You know that yourself. You can't force children to become devotees, but you can set a good example for them, and you can try to have a Krishna conscious home environment. And then also, the way you interact with them, they're inspired by you. You know, Prabhupada, I was explaining this to someone yesterday who was a teacher down in the manor, and she was asking about how to work with kids. So the thing is, like Prabhupada said, when up to the point of 5 years old, you let them do whatever. From 5 till about 15, 16, you raise them very strictly with stick. Yeah? And when they're past 15, you become their friend. Now, like with our son, you know, my wife has practiced something like that. They have a really good friendly relationship. So whenever he wants to, whenever he's kind of wants guidance, he comes to us. How many teenagers, he's a young adult now, but how many young adults go to their parents for advice? It's not common. So, a successful because it's not just about, I'm the parent, I'm in charge here. When they get to the age of being teenagers, you've got to have an active relationship with them. But whatever you're doing in your life, that's devotional service, because you're doing it as an offering to Krishna. Okay? And then, because there's no separation, it's not a problem. Hope that answers the question.
Thanks.
Do it for Krishna, and you'll be happy. Gyatva shanti muchiti, you'll attain peace. And there won't be an anxiety for you anymore. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur had 11 children, didn't he, I think? I don't think he was in anxiety about it.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So my question is, how to get to know, like Krishna is reciprocating to what you are doing any service for him.
How to get to know Krishna?
To get to know how he is.
I'll show you my get to know secret. Where is it? Where did I put it? I've lost it. Is it there? Where have I lost it? This is how good I am at getting to know Krishna. I lost my connection. Where did I put it? Oh, yeah. Somewhere around there.
What, daddy or?
Big bag.
Big bag, okay.
I've got my big bag. It's around here somewhere.
I'm sure you had it when you came.
Yeah, I know I have it. I reckon the boxes were stolen. Yeah. It's okay, you don't have to get up. I'm just saying, I'll find it later. This is my connection with Krishna. This is through my japa. Yeah? So if you want to get to know Krishna, chant serious rounds.
No, like how to understand like he is reciprocating with me.
You don't worry about that, just know that he is. Yeah? And you'll have experiences. The thing is, like, if you accept Krishna's capacity to reciprocate, and that he's reciprocating with you every moment of every day, practically, okay? He's always there, he's always reciprocating. You just have to be open to seeing it. Okay? You don't have to go looking for it, because it's there. He reveals himself to you. He's there in your heart, he's not going to not reciprocate with you. But it's just a matter of us being open to that, open to seeing it, how he is reciprocating. And the more you go on in the practice of bhakti, the more you will see that. He reciprocates it. He's reciprocating with all, like, he's feeding the animals in the forest, and he feeds these gigantic elephants and whales in the ocean and stuff like that. And that's his reciprocation with them. He's feeding them. He's feeding you. He's feeding me. He's feeding all of us. He says, I'm the light of the sun and the moon. I'm the fire of digestion. I'm the ability in man. So, all you have to do is you read the 10th chapter of the Gita, and you can see how Krishna is reciprocating with us in so many different ways. He's providing us with the transcendental knowledge. He's providing us with the holy name to chant. How much more reciprocation do we need? How much more evidence do we need? He's giving you everything you need to function in this world. All we have to do is be grateful. That's all we have to do. Gratitude is a very important quality to have. And to understand it's coming from Krishna. And that's one of the things Prabhupada, he often criticizes the scientists. And he says, why do they deny Krishna? like all their theories, that's fine. Whatever they're going with the theories, I mean, we don't argue that. But don't deny Krishna. Don't deny the existence of God. And don't deny that everything's coming from Krishna. And that's what we have to do as devotees. If we accept that everything I have is by the mercy of Krishna. And he's the proprietor, he's the employer, all these things. Hare Krishna. Anything else?
One more question.
Yeah, sure.
So, like, which is the best mood to serve the deities? Like, in what mood we should serve the deity? In like Dasibhav or
Gopapata Pada Kavalai Dasa Dasa Anu Dasa. I'm just a menial servant. That's our position, because our deity worship is in the mood of in this Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So it means we do service following rules and regulations. He is the master, I am his servant, menial servant. And actually, Dasa Dasa Anu Dasa, I serve my guru who serves his guru who serves his guru. And you'll see all through our parampara, it's all Das Das Anu Das. We're all serving our guru or our superior who's serving his superior who's serving his superior. Ultimately serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, serving Radharani, serving Krishna. That's the only word. Hare Krishna. You want to do a kirtan? He does better kirtan than I do. Much better.
وَمَكَانَ تِمِرًا